Easy Explained Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus by Ludwig Wittgenstein, propositions 6.41 through 6.43, calling this from ethics to eternity. So notice how we're skipping effectively the first half of proposition 6 here. I think it's really weedy, and for our purposes, really what we're focusing on, I think it makes more sense to jump to 6.41, which is a long one. I'm going to start by just recreating it only in part here. But here, Wittgenstein says that the sense of the world must lie outside it. In the world, everything is as it is and happens as it happens. There is no value in it. And if there were, then it would be of no value. So here we're coming off of structuring the world as the limits of our language, right? The limits of the world are the limits of our language. The limits of our language are the limits of the world. And, we're in 1920, 1921 here. We're really kind of setting up this absurd worldview that's really going to be furthered by Sartre and Camus and others in the coming years. But maybe there's no value itself in the world. We're going to start to take an ethical stance here, an ethical view for Wittgenstein, seeing, if we are limiting the world by ourselves, and what does that mean for what kind of sense, what kind of value is there in it, and what that means and what we should do about it. So let's move on to proposition 6.42. Let's make this project a little more explicit. Here he says that is why there cannot be propositions of ethics. Propositions cannot express anything higher. I think here he means of themselves, right? Propositions have to be very simple, clear, true, correct, straightforward. Ethics, they're going to be of a higher realm. It's going to be very hard to talk about the things that we should do for each other as separate worlds, separate limited worlds. So let's go into proposition 6.421. Wittgenstein says it is clear that ethics cannot be stated. They cannot be stated clearly, therefore they cannot be said, right? Ethics are transcendental. Ethics and aesthetics are one, right? So here he's actually tying in some of his art theory as well, right? What is beauty? What is beautiful? For Wittgenstein, it's going to be the same thing as what is right, what is moral, what is just, right? Those things are going to be very hard for us to talk about. They're impossible. That's a transcendental practice. Sure, they very, very well exist, but they're going to be very hard to communicate. So that's proposition 6.421. Moving to 6.431. Here we're going to start transitioning into this to eternity piece that I put in the title of this section. So just as in death, the world does not change, but ends. So death is an end, and the world will also end in death. So let's keep going with that a little bit deeper. Proposition 6.4311. He says, death is not an event in life, as death is not experienced. If eternity is understood not as endless temporal duration, but as timelessness, then someone who lives in the present lives eternally. Our life is endless, just as our visual field is limitless. And here I think it's the idea of infinite infinities, right? You can just keep breaking something, fractaling something to oblivion, right? It can just keep going. And this is also, we're starting to echo Buddhism, maybe Zen Buddhism here, of this idea that the present is eternity, right? Being fully present gives you access to this timelessness, this eternity, versus infinity, right? This endless temporal duration. He is making that distinction between infinity versus outside of time completely, the timeless or the eternal. So let's keep going with this idea of eternity for Wittgenstein, going into 6.4312. Again, a much longer one. I'm just going to recreate this in part, kind of tie up some of his worldviews, especially when it comes to the soul and death. And let's let him say it. Not only does temporal immortality of the soul, that is to say, its eternal survival after death, like any kind of warrant, but most crucially, its assumption fails entirely to achieve the intended result. Implying maybe the intended result is some kind of peace, satisfaction, and answer, right? He goes on to say that, for is a riddle thereby solved by my eternal survival? Is this eternal life not just as mysterious as our present one? The solution to the riddle of life in space and time lies outside space and time. And this reminds me of the classic thought experiment of consciousness trying to understand consciousness, right? Or your brain thinking about the brain. You're always going to be limited. You're always going to be stuck inside of that circle, right? There's going to be just an infinite fall off here. You can only ever understand so much. And that's what Wittgenstein is saying about this idea of the soul surviving after death. Even if there is warrant to that, even if we can somehow prove that is true, what would that solution offer us in terms of answers? He's saying that mystery is just as great as our present one here alive on Earth, so let's focus on that. So for now, that's really just focusing on proposition 6.3, 6.4. Going to keep going through the end of the book coming up next, but for now, hope this helps.